You don't expect betrayal to come from the ceiling. You don't expect it to be small, silent, and watching you every single night, and you definitely don't expect yourself to do nothing when you find it. I noticed it on a Tuesday, nothing dramatic, no thunder, no music, no sudden realization like in the movies, just a quiet moment standing on a chair, changing the batteries in the smoke detector in our hallway. That's when I saw it. A second lens, not where it should be, not part of the device. Too precise, too deliberate. At first, my brain tried to protect me. It told me I was overthinking, that maybe it was a sensor or some newer model feature I didn't know about. But I work in IT. I know what a lens looks like. And that was a camera. I remember climbing down slowly, like the floor might disappear if I moved too fast. My hands were steady, but my chest felt hollow, like something inside me had quietly stepped back and said, "Let's just watch what happens next." I didn't tell anyone, not my husband, not my friends, not even myself, fully, because saying it out loud would make it real. And if it was real, then the question wasn't what it was who put it there. Our house isn't big, 2 bedrooms, 1 small study, a narrow hallway that connects everything. There's no reason for a camera there, unless someone wanted to see everything, every movement, every conversation, every quiet moment you think belongs only to you. I spent that entire day pretending nothing had changed. I made breakfast, packed my son's lunch, smiled when my husband kissed my cheek before leaving for work. The same routine, the same gestures. But now, every action felt performed, like I was suddenly aware of an audience I couldn't see. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every possibility. Could it be a break-in? Someone planting it? No signs of forced entry. Could it be random? Some kind of sick prank? No. Too precise. Too intentional. And then there was the thought I didn't want to think, the one that kept returning, quieter each time, but heavier. What if it wasn't a stranger? The next morning, I did something I still don't fully understand. I left it there. I didn't remove the camera. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I decided to observe. If someone was watching me, then maybe I could learn something by letting them believe I didn't know. It sounds calculated now, almost strategic, but at the time, it didn't feel like strength. It felt like fear dressed up as patience. Days passed, then a week. Nothing obvious changed, but everything felt different. My husband started asking small, specific questions. What did you do after I left yesterday? Did anyone come by? Why were you in the hallway so long last night? They were casual, light, almost careless, but too aligned with what that camera could see. I started noticing patterns. The way his questions matched my movements, the timing, the details. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. I began testing it. Simple things, standing in the hallway longer than usual, pausing, looking directly at the detector for just a second longer than normal. The next day, he asked almost jokingly, "You zoning out these days? Saw you just standing there yesterday." Saw you, not heard, not noticed. Saw. I smiled. I laughed it off. But something inside me shifted. The worst part wasn't the fear. It was the realization that someone I trusted might not just be watching me, but studying me, learning me, controlling the narrative of my own life without me even knowing it. And I still said nothing. Because I needed certainty, because if I was wrong, I would destroy everything. And if I was right, then everything was already broken. It was a quiet Saturday evening when things finally cracked. We were sitting at dinner, just the 3 of us. My husband, relaxed. My son, distracted, playing with his food like always. And me, pretending I wasn't living inside a question I couldn't answer. That's when my son looked up, completely innocent, completely unaware, and said something so small, so casual. But it hit me harder than anything before. He said, "Mom, why does Daddy watch you on his phone when he's at work?" And in that moment, everything I had been trying not to believe stopped being a possibility and became the truth. For a second, I thought I misheard him. Kids say strange things all the time. They mix imagination with reality so effortlessly that you learn to filter, to smile, to redirect. But this wasn't one of those moments. The room didn't move. The air didn't shift. It just tightened. My husband froze. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but I did, because I had been watching him, the same way he had been watching me. My son kept eating, completely unaware of what he had just done, of the invisible thread he had pulled, unraveling something I had been holding together with silence and denial. I forced a smile. Slow, careful. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" My voice sounded normal. Too normal. He shrugged, still focused on his plate. On his phone, when he's at work, he shows me sometimes, "You're walking, or cleaning, or just standing there." Every word landed softly, but each one carried weight. I looked at my husband. He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he reached for his glass, took a sip of water, and said casually, "He's probably talking about those home security apps. You know how kids are." It was smooth, practiced, too fast. I nodded, as if that made sense, as if everything was fine, as if my entire world hadn't just shifted into something unrecognizable, but inside, something cold settled into place. Not panic, not even anger, clarity. That night, I didn't confront him. That's what most people would expect, right? A scene, a breakdown. Questions fired like bullets, but I had already spent days sitting with uncertainty. Now I had something else. Proof. And with proof came a different kind of control. I waited until he fell asleep, his breathing slow, even. The same way it had always been. Familiar. That's what made it worse. I slipped out of bed quietly, my feet memorizing every creak in the floor as I moved toward the living room. His phone was on the coffee table, face down, unlocked. That, more than anything, told me he didn't think I knew. I picked it up. For a moment, I just held it. It's strange, the things we hesitate over, not the discovery of betrayal, but the confirmation of it, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Still, my thumb moved. I opened it. It didn't take long. There it was. An app I didn't recognize. Minimal design. No name I could connect to anything familiar. But when I opened it, my breath caught. A live feed. Our hallway. The exact angle of the smoke detector, clear, sharp, silent. I watched myself from earlier that day, recorded clips stored neatly in a timeline. Me walking past, me pausing, me existing in what I thought was privacy. Every movement, reduced to footage, data. I scrolled, days of it, weeks, maybe longer. I didn't check. I couldn't, because what mattered wasn't how long it had been happening. It was that it had been happening at all. Then I noticed something else. Folders, organized, labeled. My name, my routines, times I left the house, times I came back, even notes, short, precise observations. Spoke on phone longer than usual. Paused in hallway, possible suspicion. Check detector, monitor closely. I felt something twist inside me, not just because he was watching me, but because he was documenting me, like I was a subject, an experiment, or worse, a problem he was trying to solve. I put the phone down exactly where it had been, same angle, same position, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid of him, but because I was trying to understand him. We build lives with people based on versions of them we believe in. So what happens when that version isn't real? Was he always like this? Or did something shift? Was it control, insecurity, paranoia, or something deeper, something quieter, something that doesn't show itself until it's too late? The next morning, I watched him differently. Every gesture, every word. He smiled, asked about breakfast, kissed my forehead like always, and for the first time, it felt like watching a performance. Not his, mine. I needed a plan, not emotional, not reactive, clear, measured. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. My son had seen it, which meant he had been exposed to something he didn't understand, something he thought was normal. And that was where the line was drawn. Over the next few days, I prepared quietly. I copied everything, every clip I could access, every note, every timestamp, transferred it to a secure drive, backed it up twice, not out of revenge, out of necessity. Because if this turned into something bigger, and it already had, I needed more than just words. I needed truth. Then I did something else, something small, but intentional. I changed my behavior, slightly, subtly. I created inconsistencies. Left the house at unusual times, paused in places that didn't make sense, whispered things under my breath, not real words, just enough to see if he would react. And he did, every time. His questions became sharper, less casual, more pointed. Why were you outside at 3 p.m. yesterday? Who were you talking to? You've been acting different. There it was, the shift. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was losing control of the narrative he had built, and that made him uncomfortable. The confrontation came a week later, not because I rushed it, but because I chose the moment. Dinner again, same table, same routine, but this time I wasn't pretending. My son had gone to his room. The house was quiet, and I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as my husband, but as the person who had been watching me without my consent, without my knowledge, without my permission. I know about the camera. I said it calmly. No anger, no raised voice, just truth. He didn't react immediately. Then he laughed, soft, dismissive. What camera? It was almost impressive. The denial, the confidence. But I had already moved past doubt. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small device, plugged it into the TV, and pressed play. The screen lit up, the hallway. Me, walking, pausing, looking. And then, the notes, his notes, displayed clearly, unmistakably. The silence that followed was different, heavy, final. His face changed, not into guilt, not even into fear, but into something else. Something colder. You went through my phone. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. I nodded. Yes. Another pause, longer this time. Then he leaned back, exhaled slowly, and said something I'll never forget. Was Was just making sure everything was normal. Normal. That word again. Used to justify something that wasn't, to shrink something that was too big to ignore. Normal? I repeated. You installed a hidden camera in our home. You recorded me without my knowledge. You documented my behavior like I was, what? A subject? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, you've been distant. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how small that sounded compared to what he had done. You felt I was distant, so you started watching me? His eyes didn't leave mine. I needed to understand. There it was, the truth, not clean, not reasonable, but real. And did you understand? Another silence. Then quietly, no. That was the moment everything became clear, not the camera, not the recordings, but the realization that whatever he was looking for, he wasn't going to find it this way. I'm leaving. I said it simply, not as a threat, not as a reaction, but as a decision. For the first time, he looked uncertain. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm responding. And that was the difference. The next few days were quiet, strangely quiet. No arguments, no dramatic scenes, just distance. Papers filed, arrangements made, conversations kept minimal. I removed the camera myself, carefully, deliberately, held it in my hand for a moment before throwing it away. Not because it mattered anymore, but because I needed to feel the end of it. My son adjusted faster than I expected. Kids do that. They don't always understand the details, but they understand when something feels wrong. And when it finally This is another reads. As for me, it took time, not to heal, but to redefine trust, privacy, control, the things we assume are part of a relationship, until they're not. Sometimes I still think about that moment. Standing on the chair, looking into that tiny lens, and choosing silence. People might wonder why I didn't act immediately, why I didn't confront him right away, why I stayed quiet. But the truth is, sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's observation. Sometimes it's the space you need to see clearly. Because if I had reacted in that moment, I might have doubted myself. I might have been convinced it was nothing. I might have stayed. But I didn't. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this. Not every betrayal is loud. Some of them are quiet, hidden, watching, waiting for you to notice. And when you do, what you choose next changes everything.